There was a tragedy here at Flying Baron Estates yesterday at 10 a.m. involving the lead guitar player, Randy Rhoads, 25-year-old talented guitar player for the Ozzy Osbourne Band.
What if everything you thought you knew about one of rock music's most tragic deaths was completely wrong? For over 40 years, fans around the world have believed that Randy Rhoads died because of a reckless pilot's dangerous stunt gone horribly wrong. But now, a shocking new theory from someone who knew Randy personally has turned that story completely upside down. And the truth might be even more heartbreaking than the lie we've all been living with. I'm talking about Randy Rhoads, the 25-year-old guitar wizard who changed rock music forever in just 2 short years. The man who saved Ozzy Osbourne's career when it was hanging by a thread. The musician who created guitar solos so perfect they still give people goosebumps today. And the gentle soul whose life ended in flames on March 19, 1982, in a plane crash that should never have happened. But here's the thing that's been keeping me up at night ever since I discovered this information. What if Randy's death wasn't caused by what we've always been told? What if the real reason behind that fatal plane crash is so much worse than anyone ever imagined? Today, we're going to dive deep into a mystery that has haunted the rock world for decades, and I'm going to share with you the devastating truth that has finally come to light. Before we get into this mind-blowing revelation, let me paint you a picture of who Randy Rhoads really was. This wasn't just another rock star with a wild lifestyle. Randy was different. He was a classically trained musician who practiced guitar for hours every single day. While other rockers were partying until dawn, Randy was in his hotel room working on new riffs and studying music theory. He was shy, polite, and completely dedicated to his craft. Randy came from a musical family in Burbank, California. His mother Dolores ran a music school, and Randy grew up surrounded by the sound of lessons and practice sessions. He wasn't some kid who picked up a guitar to rebel against his parents. Music was literally in his blood, and he approached it with the seriousness of a classical composer. When Randy was just a teenager, he formed a band called Quiet Riot with his friend Kevin Dubrow. They played the Los Angeles club scene, building a following one show at a time. Randy's guitar playing was already turning heads. He had this unique style that mixed heavy metal power with classical precision. Other guitarists would stop whatever they were doing just to watch him play. But Randy's big break came in 1979 when Ozzy Osbourne was looking for a new guitarist. Ozzy had just been kicked out of Black Sabbath, the band he helped create. His solo career was basically dead before it started. He was drinking heavily, and nobody in the music business wanted to touch him. Ozzy was desperate, and he needed a miracle. That miracle walked into his audition in the form of a quiet 22-year-old with long blonde hair and a white Flying V guitar. Randy didn't look like a typical metal guitarist. He looked more like a classical music student who had wandered into the wrong room. But the moment he started playing, everyone in that room knew they were witnessing something special. Randy didn't just play guitar, he painted with it. Every note had purpose, every solo told a story. When he played Crazy Train or Mr. Crowley, it wasn't just music, it was pure emotion flowing through 6 strings. He could make that guitar sing, scream, whisper, and cry. And most importantly, he made Ozzy sound better than Ozzy had ever sounded before. The 2 albums Randy recorded with Ozzy, Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman, became instant classics. Songs like Crazy Train, Flying High Again, and Shot in the Dark are still played on rock radio every single day, more than 4 decades later. Randy's guitar solos on these albums are studied by music students around the world. They're that good. But Randy wasn't satisfied with just being a rock star. Even while he was touring with Ozzy and playing to sold-out arenas, he was taking classical guitar lessons. He would find teachers in every city they visited. Randy had this dream of eventually going back to school to become a classical guitarist and maybe even a music teacher like his mother. He was humble about his success in a way that seems almost impossible by today's standards. Randy never bragged about his talent or acted like a big shot. He was always learning, always trying to get better. The other musicians in Ozzy's band loved him not just for his incredible playing, but because he was genuinely a good person. Which makes what happened on March 19, 1982, even more tragic and senseless. The band was in the middle of a tour, traveling across the country in their bus. They had just played a show in Knoxville, Tennessee, and were on their way to their next gig in Orlando, Florida. The bus pulled over at a small airstrip called Flying Baron Estates, just outside Leesburg, Florida. This wasn't unusual. Tour buses need to make stops, and this particular airstrip was often used by celebrities and musicians. At the airstrip, there was a pilot named Andrew Aycock. He was 36 years old and had been offering plane rides to musicians and celebrities who stopped by. On that morning, Aycock offered to take some of the band members up for a quick flight in his small single-engine plane. It was supposed to be a fun little joyride, something to break up the monotony of being on a tour bus for hours and hours. Now, here's where the story gets complicated, and where we need to talk about what we've been told for all these years versus what might have actually happened. The official story that everyone has believed for over 40 years goes like this. Aycock was high on cocaine and started showing off. He flew the plane dangerously low, trying to buzz the tour bus and scare the people inside. On his third pass, he clipped the bus with the plane, lost control, and crashed into a nearby mansion. The plane burst into flames immediately. Randy Aycock and a woman named Rachel Youngblood, who worked as the band's seamstress, were all killed instantly. Their bodies were so badly burned that Randy could only be identified by his dental records. For 4 decades, that's been the story. A reckless, drugged-up pilot showing off and killing 3 innocent people in the process. It's a story that makes you angry because it seems so preventable, so pointlessly stupid. And maybe that's exactly why everyone accepted it for so long. Sometimes the simplest explanation feels like it has to be the right one. But what if it isn't? What if the real story is completely different and infinitely more heartbreaking? Enter Bob Daisley, a man whose opinion carries enormous weight in the rock music world. Bob was the bass player on those legendary Randy Rhoads albums. He co-wrote many of the songs that made Randy famous. Bob knew Randy personally. He was there during the recording sessions, the tours, the late-night conversations about music and life. If anyone would know the real truth about what happened, it would be Bob Daisley. And just recently, Bob shared a theory about Randy's death that changes everything. In a January 2025 interview on the Talk Louder podcast, Bob revealed something that has been eating at him for years. Something that makes the whole tragic story even more devastating than we ever imagined. According to Bob, the plane crash wasn't caused by a reckless pilot at all. Instead, he believes it was caused by a medical emergency that no one could have predicted or prevented. Bob thinks that Rachel Youngblood, the 58-year-old seamstress who was in the plane with Randy and Aycock, had a heart attack while they were in the air. Now, before you dismiss this as just another conspiracy theory, listen to the evidence. Bob points out that the autopsy report showed that Rachel had indeed suffered a heart attack. But here's the crucial detail that changes everything. The plane they were in had dual controls. That means both the pilot and the person sitting next to him could control the aircraft. Bob's theory is that when Rachel had her heart attack, she was sitting in the co-pilot seat with access to those dual controls. In her medical emergency, struggling with the pain and panic of a massive heart attack, she may have accidentally pressed down on the controls, sending the plane into a deadly dive. The type of plane they were flying, with its distinctive V-shaped tail, is notoriously difficult to pull out of a steep dive. Even an experienced pilot like Aycock would have had only seconds to try to regain control. Bob believes that Aycock wasn't buzzing the bus at all. Instead, he was desperately fighting to save the plane and everyone on board as it plummeted toward the ground. Think about how much more tragic this makes the whole situation. Randy, who was afraid of flying in the first place, had reluctantly gotten on that plane for what was supposed to be a quick, peaceful ride. Rachel, who had told people she had a heart condition and didn't really want to go up in the air, was convinced to join them with promises that it would be a calm, gentle flight. Bob revealed in his interview that Rachel had actually expressed concerns about flying because of her heart condition. According to what Bob learned after the crash, she had told Aycock that she didn't want to go up because she had heart problems. Aycock had reassured her, promising to keep the flight smooth and safe, with no crazy maneuvers or stunts. But when you're having a heart attack thousands of feet in the air, promises don't matter. Medical emergencies don't care about your plans or your precautions. Rachel's heart gave out at the worst possible moment, in the worst possible place, and her involuntary reaction to the cardiac episode may have doomed everyone on that plane. This theory completely reframes Randy's death. Instead of being the victim of someone else's reckless stupidity, Randy became the victim of a tragic medical emergency that no one could have seen coming. It's almost worse, isn't it? At least when you can blame a drug-fueled pilot, you can be angry. You can point fingers and demand justice. But when the cause is a 60-year-old woman's failing heart, there's no one to blame. There's no villain in this story, just three people who were in the wrong place when biology and physics combined in the most devastating way possible. Bob's theory also explains some of the inconsistencies in the original story that have bothered people for years. Why would an experienced pilot like Aycock, who made his living flying celebrities, suddenly decide to do dangerous stunts that could end his career and possibly his life? Why would he risk everything for a few seconds of showing off? It never really made sense. But a medical emergency followed by a desperate attempt to save the plane? That makes perfect sense. That explains why the plane was flying so low and erratically. Aycock wasn't buzzing the bus for fun. He was fighting for his life and the lives of his passengers, trying everything he could to pull out of a dive that Rachel's heart attack had initiated. The fact that the plane clipped the tour bus before crashing into the mansion also supports this theory. If Aycock had been in complete control and just showing off, he would have had better awareness of his altitude and surroundings. But if he was frantically trying to recover from an unexpected dive, it makes sense that he might have miscalculated his height and struck the bus. Now, I want to be clear about something. This is still just a theory. Bob Daisley wasn't on that plane, and he wasn't even with the band at the time of the crash. He had been fired from Ozzy's group after the recording of Diary of a Madman. So his information comes from what he learned in the years following the tragedy, not from first-hand experience. But Bob's theory is based on some compelling evidence. The autopsy did show that Rachel had suffered a heart attack. The plane did have dual controls. And Bob's explanation makes more logical sense than the story we've all accepted for so many years. More importantly, Bob knew these people. He had worked closely with Randy and had met Rachel during his time with the band. His insight into their personalities and behaviors gives weight to his theory. Bob describes Randy as someone who was already nervous about flying, which makes it even more unlikely that he would have encouraged or enjoyed dangerous aerial stunts. The ripple effects of Randy's death went far beyond just the loss of an incredible musician. Ozzy was devastated. In his autobiography, he wrote that he almost quit music entirely after Randy died. The guilt and grief nearly destroyed him. Sharon Osbourne, who would later become Ozzy's wife and manager, was also deeply affected. She had been asleep on the tour bus when the plane crashed and was awakened by the sound of the impact. The other band members were traumatized. Many of them struggled with survivor's guilt, wondering why they hadn't been on that plane, why they were still alive when Randy wasn't. The tour was immediately canceled, and it took months before anyone could even think about making music again. But perhaps the biggest tragedy is what the world lost when Randy died. He was only 25 years old. Think about that for a moment. Most musicians don't even hit their creative peak until their 30s or 40s. Randy was still learning, still growing, still discovering new ways to push the boundaries of what a guitar could do. Imagine the albums he never got to make. The songs he never got to write. The young guitarists he never got to inspire and teach. Randy had dreams of going back to school, of studying classical music more seriously, of maybe becoming a teacher like his mother. All of those possibilities died with him in that burning plane. The guitar world has produced many incredible players since 1982. Musicians like Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, Yngwie Malmsteen, and countless others have pushed guitar technique to incredible heights. But there's something about Randy's playing that still stands apart. It wasn't just technical skill, though he had plenty of that. It was the emotion, the melody, the way he could make even the most complex solo feel like a natural expression of human feeling. Randy influenced generations of guitarists who came after him. Everyone from Metallica's Kirk Hammett to Rage Against the Machine's Tom Morello has spoken about Randy's impact on their playing. When he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2021, the tributes poured in from musicians around the world, all talking about how Randy had changed their understanding of what guitar music could be. But here's what really gets to me about Bob Daisley's theory. If he's right, then Randy's death becomes even more of a senseless tragedy. At least when you can blame drugs or reckless behavior, there's a lesson there. You can say, don't do drugs, don't take stupid risks, and maybe this won't happen to you. But if Randy died because a 58-year-old woman's heart gave out at the worst possible moment, then there's no lesson. There's no moral. There's just the cold, random cruelty of a universe that doesn't care about talent or kindness or dreams. This theory also makes you think about all the other stories we accept without question. How many times have we heard the official version of a tragic event and never bothered to dig deeper? How many times have we let the simple explanation satisfy us when the truth might be much more complex and heartbreaking? Bob Daisley's revelation reminds us that behind every headline, every official report, every widely accepted story, there are real people with real lives and real pain. Rachel Youngblood wasn't just the seamstress or the other victim. She was a person with a heart condition who was afraid to fly but was talked into it with promises of safety. She was someone who probably spent her last moments in unimaginable pain and terror, not knowing that her medical emergency was about to claim 2 other lives. Andrew Aycock wasn't just the reckless pilot. If Bob's theory is correct, Aycock was a professional who found himself in an impossible situation and died trying to save his passengers. Instead of being remembered as a villain, maybe he should be remembered as someone who fought against overwhelming odds to prevent a tragedy, even though he ultimately failed. And Randy was just a young man who loved music more than anything else in the world. He was someone who practiced for hours every day, not for fame or money, but because he genuinely loved the sound of a perfectly played note. He was someone who was still learning, still growing, still dreaming about what he might accomplish someday. The fact that all 3 of them died because of something as random and uncontrollable as a heart attack makes their deaths feel even more cruel and senseless. There's no justice in it, no meaning, no greater purpose. Just 3 lives cut short by biology and bad timing. But maybe there's something we can learn from Bob Daisley's courage in sharing this theory. Maybe the lesson isn't about the crash itself, but about the importance of not accepting easy answers when the truth might be more complicated. Maybe it's about remembering that behind every tragedy are real human beings with their own fears, dreams, and struggles. Or maybe the lesson is simpler than that. Maybe it's just about remembering to appreciate the artists and creators while they're still with us. Randy Rhoads created music that has brought joy to millions of people for over 40 years. His guitar solos still make people stop what they're doing and just listen. His influence can be heard in countless musicians who came after him. In a way, Randy achieved a kind of immortality that most people can only dream of. Every time someone picks up a guitar and tries to play Crazy Train, Randy is there. Every time a young musician discovers the beauty of combining classical technique with rock power, Randy is there. Every time someone listens to Mr. Crowley and gets chills during that incredible guitar solo, Randy is there. The mystery of Randy Rhoads' death may finally be solved, and the truth may be more heartbreaking than the lie we've lived with for 40 years. But the mystery of Randy's music, the secret of what made him so special, that's something that can never be solved or explained. It can only be experienced, one perfect note at a time. Bob Daisley's theory doesn't change the fact that we lost one of the greatest guitarists who ever lived. It doesn't bring Randy back or ease the pain of his family and friends. But it does remind us that the truth is often more complex and more human than the simple stories we tell ourselves. If Bob is right, then Randy Rhoads died not because of someone else's recklessness, but because of a tragedy that no one could have prevented. It's a harder truth to accept because it offers no one to blame, no way to make sense of the senselessness. But maybe that's exactly why it's important to tell this story. Sometimes the truth isn't satisfying or comforting. Sometimes it's just true. And maybe that's enough. Maybe knowing that Randy's death was truly an accident, caused by a medical emergency rather than stupidity or drugs, gives us a different way to remember him. Instead of being angry about how he died, maybe we can focus on being grateful for what he gave us in his 25 short years. Randy Rhoads changed rock music forever. He proved that heavy metal could be both powerful and beautiful, both technical and emotional. He showed that you could be a rock star and still be humble, still be learning, still be kind. And now, thanks to Bob Daisley's courage in sharing this theory, maybe we can finally put to rest one of rock music's most persistent and painful mysteries. The Randy Rhoads mystery may finally be solved, and it isn't good. But sometimes the truth, even when it hurts, is better than living with a lie. And the truth is that Randy Rhoads was taken from us by nothing more than bad luck and worse timing. There's no villain in this story, no one to blame, no way to make it make sense. There's just a young man who loved music, an older woman with a bad heart, and a pilot who tried his best to save them all. That's the truth Bob Daisley has given us. It's not the truth we wanted, but it's the truth we needed. And maybe, finally, Randy Rhoads can rest in peace, knowing that the world finally understands what really happened on that terrible day in March 1982. If this story moved you as much as it moved me, please hit that like button and share this video with every rock music fan you know. This is the kind of truth that needs to be heard, the kind of story that deserves to be told. And if you want to hear more deep dives into rock music's greatest mysteries and untold stories, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Because there are so many more secrets waiting to be uncovered, so many more truths waiting to be told. Until next time, keep the music alive, and never forget the artists who gave everything to create the sounds we love.